Greetings and welcome to week 5 as we study Judaism. Now here we're introducing our first theistic religion. With theism, of course, there is one God who created all things distinct from himself. This is quite different from the worldview of pantheism, which we've looked at up till now, where God and the universe are ultimately one. There's no ultimate distinction there. It's all eternal. So now, as we look at Judaism today, we have to take on a very specific mindset. How can we begin to think like a Jew? So to assist us with that, I've actually brought along my Jewish yarmulke. And as I put on my yarmulke, this is symbolic of a Jew who would want to submit to God. It symbolizes submission and also submitting to the law of God. So if I'm thinking like a Jew, what specifically am I thinking about? Well, 3 important things in their mindset are, first of all, have to think creation. And as we said, Judaism holds a very unique cosmology. Actually, Genesis 1 was written to combat polytheism of the early Egyptians. So Genesis 1, you see that there's one God, Elohim, who created all things, and that combats the idea that there was different gods that were responsible for all the different aspects of creation. So with this in mind, the Hebrew thinks about creation in terms of something that's very good and special, and it's been designed for us to enjoy. Now, behind creation is another aspect of the Jewish mindset, is again one God. God in the Jewish mind is so great and so holy that one of their names, Yahweh, is not even a name that they would pronounce. It's so holy. Yahweh is the notion of God being the Lord, being the I am, literally. And so this God is so much greater than all the other gods, they would not pronounce his name. Finally, if we're thinking like a Jew, we have to think about the story mentality. The history of the Jewish people helped to create their identity and their sense of community. So that story incorporates a couple things. First of all, the notion of covenant. And so the whole story begins with God calling Abraham to leave his homeland and to go to a land that God would promise him. And this was God's covenant with Abraham, to give him this land, to make his people into a great nation, and to bless the world through Abraham. But that's just the beginning of the covenant story. Later on we see added the covenant with Moses, where God gives the Jewish people the law, instructing them how to live and how to worship God. And then after that, the covenant with David, where he promises to give the Jewish people an eternal dynasty, and that the Messiah will eventually sit on the throne, and that the Jewish people will reign over all the earth with this eternal kingdom. And then finally, the new covenant near the end of the Old Testament, which God promises that he will write his law upon their hearts. But along with the covenant story, we also have to look at the story of redemption, which is vital for understanding Judaism. And we see early on in Exodus, where the Jewish people are found enslaved to the Egyptians. And they've been there for 400 years as slaves, and along comes Moses and acts as a redeemer and helps them to escape from slavery. Well, eventually they become this great nation that they were promised to be with the Abrahamic covenant. But then, because of idolatry, eventually they're taken into exile under the Babylonians. And they're there for 70 plus years. But eventually, under Cyrus, they're allowed to return. So this story in the Jewish people of continually getting into trouble, but then being redeemed from trouble, is vital to understanding their mentality. Well, that's a brief introduction to Judaism. Have a great week, and look forward to talking to you soon.